The IS-6 is moving up to battle rating 7.3 and tier 6 tanks are moving up to 9.0. My name is MikeGoesBoom and thank you for watching.
You can lift your head up to the sky, take a deeper breath and give it.
Alright, hold your horses, oh. There are more interesting changes to go through. In this video we'll be talking about the battle rating changes and the economy changes for both aircraft and tanks. The battle ratings are mostly tanks, but economy changes also affect mostly aircraft actually. But before we go ahead, let's just have a quick word from our sponsor. This video is sponsored by the free Golden Eagles app. Download it to your Android device with the link down below and use the code for 10 free Golden Eagles. Now I do realize that many miles away has already beaten me to this by a couple of days. I was originally going to release this video like on Friday, but just didn't have any time to actually finish it. But he used my chart without even knowing it, so screw it if I'm not going to do it as well. I'm kidding, of course. If you want to see Miles' perspective, I'm going to leave a link to his video in the description down below. We're likely to have some different opinions on how these battle rating changes will actually affect the game. So, I've gone through the battle ratings of all the existing tanks from battle rating 5.7 and up, and compared them to what they will be after the changes and put it all into a nice and easy to read table. Of course, the biggest news here is that finally tanks are going to have a 9.0 max battle rating. This results in a decompression across the board and some very interesting down and up tiers. So let's not waste any more time and let's go right into some of these changes. Starting off, the Stura Emil goes down from 6.0 and joins the 5.7 battle rating bracket, given it the same battle rating as the Steyr Waffenträger. Now this is very interesting. This is a German tank destroyer with a 128mm cannon. And at 5.7 this is probably going to be the deadliest cannon at this tier, bar maybe the SC-100Y. In fact, this cannon might even be slightly overkill. Let's just say it probably won't have any problems penetrating anything, even in a full up tier. Next, the American and Japanese M41s are moving down to 6.0. This should give them a slightly easier time and stop them from facing tanks like the IS-6. The new Japanese premium tank hasn't really taken too long to get up tiers, moving up to 6.3. This is the whole re-prototype I'm talking about. It shouldn't really be too much of a change given that Japan doesn't have any 7.3 tanks, but this does mean that this tank can still face IS-6s. Now 6.7 is an interesting bracket. There are a couple of changes here. Mainly the T95, the American T95 is moving away from 6.7, it's actually getting an up tier. Meanwhile, the Japanese Type 61 is moving down to 6.7. This could be a very interesting time for the Japanese. At 7.0 we now have the American T95. This is going to make the armor slightly less available since it's not going to be facing 8.0 tanks. But at the same time it's not too much of a change given that the new battle rating changes have created whole new black holes of battle ratings. So the 8.0 battle rating that you're thinking of that we have right now is not going to be the same after the patch, so keep that in mind. The Jagdpanzer 4.5 is finally moving down to 7.0, making it closer to the RE251, and might indeed be a good flanking ambush tank for the German 7.0 lineup. In fact, the whole German 7.0 lineup looks very strong now. You have the 10.5cm Tiger, you have the Panther 2, you have the Kugelblitz, you have the Jagdtiger, and now you have the Jagdpanzer 4.5. Next at battle rating 7.3, the collective sigh of every player in the game, the IS-6 has been moved up to 7.3. This means that this tank will no longer face 6.0 tanks, it's no longer going to face 76mm jumbos, it's no longer going to face the M41s, it's no longer going to be facing the first series of Panthers, it's no longer going to be facing the Black Prince. That said, the top tier position is still going to be pretty much the same, given that all the previously 8.0 tanks, or at least most of the previously 8.0 tanks, have been moved up to 8.3 as well. Now 7.7 is a very interesting battle rating. In fact, we're going to talk a little bit more about this. Firstly, both the first M60 and the first Leopard 1 have been moved down to this BR, as has also the Japanese ST-B1. Meanwhile, the Russian T-54 1947, which used to be battle rating 7.3, has been moved up to 7.7. Now why exactly is this battle rating so interesting? I have a feeling this is going to be what used to be the 6.7 battle rating from before. This is going to be the new black hole of matchmaking. A lot more people are going to be playing out the Leopard 1 and the M60. 6.7 tanks are probably going to be pulled up into this battle rating a lot, like they used to before, really. And I'm not really seeing 7.7 tanks having too many up tiers. And this is because the other black hole, 9.0. 9.0 being the new top tier for tanks in War Thunder means that it's always going to be having a down tier. And the max down tier that 9.0 can have is 8.0. So anything from 8.0 to 8.7 is probably going to be pulled up into 9.0, and anything from 6.7 to 7.3 is probably going to be pulled up into 7.7. Now this has some interesting results, mainly the mouse. Do you remember the tank? Of course you do. It's the German super heavy tank, which with each patch has become weaker and weaker. The armor just not really doing it against top tier HFS, but now? Honestly, now could be the time for the mouse to shine. Having the backup of the Leopard 1, which is a very mobile tank and really complements the playstyle of the mouse. Being at the top of the black hole effect from the matchmaker and probably getting a lot of down tiers, the mouse could become a force to be reckoned with again. Not 8.0, nothing really has happened, no tank has moved into 8.0, only out. As I mentioned before, the M60, the Leopard 1 and the SB1 armor moved down to 7.7, but we also had a lot of up tiers to 8.3, and 8.3 is really where the decompression of tank battle rating starts. The M60A2, the M551, die M60A1 AOS, die Leopard A1A1, die Raketenjagdpanzer II, die T10M, the Swingfire and the Striker have all been moved up to 8.3. And in fact, these are some of the first ATGMs we are seeing here. Excluding the Type 60 ATM, which is just shite and sits at 7.0, and excluding the STRV-81, which sits at 6.7, all other ATGM tanks are now at the minimum of battle rating 8.3. In fact, we have one ATGM tank at top tier at 9.0. This also results in 7.0 tanks no longer facing ATGMs. You heard it right. Rejoice! The previous top tier of 8.7 is also some tanks in that. We have the M60A1 Rise passive, the new tank with exclusive reactive armor for the Americans. You have the T55A, the IT1, the Tiefenmark Mark V and the Type 74. Now those last two are quite a bit controversial. I've seen the Reddit posts complaining about this. Especially the Chieftain Mark V, which in its essence is just the Chieftain Mark III with a slightly better engine, has now a huge difference in the battle rating. Now, as I've said before, effectively this isn't really going to have too much of an effect, since I am predicting 9.0 to be the new black hole, and between 8.7 and 8.0 it would still get up tier to 9.0, but it's a weird choice. The same thing with the Type 74 really. The Type 74 is the Japanese equivalent of the Leopard really, which does have hydropneumatic suspension, it does have a stabilizer, and it does have turret armor, but it's still a weird choice to see this at 8.7. It doesn't really have the gun for that, I have to say. And finally, 9.0, the new top tier. We have all the tier 6 tanks in here, the MBT-70, the Kampfpanzer 70, the T-64A and the Chieftain Mark X. But we also interestingly have the Raketenjagdpanzer II HOT, the ATGM tank with 800mm of penetration. In fact, this is the only previously existing tank that isn't tier 6 and is now at the top battle rating. So all of these battle rating changes are resulting in a massive decompression effect really, and will most likely result in massive meta changes. As I mentioned before, the 6.7 to 7.7 Germany bracket might become very, very strong. Especially 7.7 where the mouse is sitting, given that you have probably noticed, there is no 8.7 Germany tank. So there isn't really anything that Germany can get up tier to, at least not at 8.7. They might get up tier to 8.3, they might get up tier to 8.0, but not really 8.7 unless they are paired up with another nation. And even then, as I've mentioned before, 9.0 is probably going to be a black hole in the matchmaker and it's going to pull anything from 8.0 up into it, making the 6.7 to 7.7 battle rating matchmaking bracket very dominant. There are also no more ATGMs against 7.0 tanks, so no, your T95, even though it has been up to 7.0, will still not be facing ATGMs, of course, as I mentioned before, except for the Type 60 ATM and the STRV-81. This is also great news for the Jagdtiger, which can now use its armor, more or less, and should really help these World War II heavy tanks to be heavy tanks. Now there's just a quick PSA I want to give here. All you German tankers out there, you probably don't want to be using the Gepard, the SPA in your lineup, given that that thing is still 8.0 and is likely going to be resulting in your whole lineup to get uptiered into 9.0. That's just a fair warning here. But the battle ratings aren't the only thing that's changed. There have also been a slew of economy changes, mostly repair costs. There's only been one major change to buy and research point cost, which is the M56 Scorpion. It now costs 80,000 silver lines less to buy and 50,000 research points less to research. This should make all of you going for the M56 Scorpion right now have a little bit of an easier time. And what follows is some of the most interesting changes in repair costs that I've ever seen. You can see the full list in a link in the description down below. I've only picked out the biggest offenders here. Starting off with the American B-29, this aircraft will now cost 16,000 more silver lines to repair, given its total repair cost 48,000 silver lines. This is very expensive. I would be very impressed if you could still run profits with the B-29 if you're not running a premium account. All of the tier 6 tanks, which had received complaints of being way too expensive to repair, have had their repair costs reduced. The MBT-70 here in particular has now a 11,300 silver lines less repair costs, costing now a total of 5,000, which should actually make it possible to run profits on this tank. The Me262A1A, the German jet that I really define as being the perfect starter, is now more expensive, costing 24,450 silver lines. The C2B is actually less expensive now, costing 16,000 silver lines to repair, so the higher you go, the less they cost. The TAR-152s, both variants, have also been reduced in repair costs. The H variant now costs 15,590 silver lines to repair, and the TAR-152C has actually seen almost a 10,000 silver line reduction in its repair costs, costing now 19,000 flat. The Event 262A2A also costs less, which is an interesting contrast in comparison to the A1A. Now seeing a reduction in about 4,000 silver lines, bumping the price down to 14,190. The German Arado 234C has also seen a reduction, almost 4,000 silver lines fewer, giving it a total price of 7,700. As for the German tanks, they seem to be slightly more expensive across the board, nothing too much, but definitely noticeable. And as with the MBT-70, the Kampfpanzer 70 now also costs a lot less, costing a total of 4,900. This is actually less than the MBT-70, but is also a great reduction and should make it easy to actually run profits on these tanks. As for the Russians, they've had some interesting changes here. The IL-28 is now less expensive, not by much, less than 2,000 silver lines less, but it does now only cost 7,790 silver lines to repair. Meanwhile, the TO4 is massively, and I mean massively, nerfed. In realistic mode, the TO4 now costs 18,000 silver lines more to repair, bumping up the total price to 54,000 silver lines. This is now the most expensive aircraft in the game to maintain. The T-64A follows the example of the other tier 6 tanks in the reduction of the silver line cost, now bumping the price down by almost 13,000 silver lines, resulting in a total price of 4,330 silver lines. The I-6 has just received a slight slap. Besides being up to 7.3, it also now costs 1,000 silver lines more to repair. That's almost nothing really. The rare event KV220, interestingly, has been reduced, almost half. Here's an interesting one for the British. The Hunter F1 at one point used to be spammed to absolute crap. Then Gaijin hit it with the repair cost hammer. It cost 30,000 silver lines to repair, and suddenly no one was playing it anymore because no one could afford to play it. Now it's actually getting reduced again. From 30,000 silver lines to 20,000 silver lines. That's a 33% reduction in silver line repair costs, which should result in more Hunters being flown out. Spitfire Mark 5C has been reduced by almost 3,000 silver lines, bringing the total cost to 10,790. The Meteor Mark 8, a jet that no one really plays, has also been reduced, maybe as an incentive to be played out more. This jet now costs a total of 13,000 silver lines to repair. The Hornet has been increased. That's a new twin-engine prop for the Brits at battery 5.7, which is absolutely insane in its performance, by the way. So it's definitely justified. This aircraft will now cost a total of 10,000 civilians to repair. As for the tanks, the British tanks have had reductions across the board. Most notably, the Chieftain Mark 10, of course, being a T6 tank, has been massively reduced, costing now only 4,700 civilians to repair. And the FV4202 of all tanks has had a third reduction as well, costing now also 4,700 civilians to repair. This is interesting. The FV4202 doesn't really strike me as a tank that really needs a buff. And, well, here's the Japanese. Good news, there is actually a reduction. Yes, you heard it right. The A7M2 is getting reduced. It still costs 19,730 civilians to repair, but it is 4,000 civilians less. The other aircraft are not so lucky. Both the J2M3 and the J2M5 are getting increased by quite a bit, now each costing 24,000 civilians to repair. The Ki-84 Otsu and the Ki-84 Hei are also both being increased, the Otsu costing 23,000 civilians to repair, the Hei costing 27,000 civilians to repair. The R2Y2V, all the R2Y2s actually have been increased, the V1 costing 19,370, the V2 costing 24,350, and the V3 costing 29,000 civilians. Ouch! If you thought the Japanese aircraft were expensive before, yeah, they're getting even more expensive. Not quite tier 4 levels of expensive, but still very expensive. And finally we have the Italian aircrafts. The G55 Series 1 is now 7,000 civilians more expensive, bumping the price up to 21,000 civilians. The G56 is, wow, this is Jesus. It's 50% more expensive. The G56 will now cost you 30,850 civilians. I'm not seeing many people flying this aircraft out anymore. They simply can't afford it. Here's the thing, the economy changes are generally soft balancing tools for Gaijin. The biggest example was the Hunter. The Hunter was being spammed out, so they bumped up the repair costs so that people couldn't afford to spam it out anymore, and it massively solved the problem of the Hunter spam. But the G56 stats aren't really all that great. I've looked at the stats on Thunderskill. They're good, but not 30,000 civilians good. And again, as a massive collective sigh of every other nation, the F-84G is also being more expensive now, 8,000 civilians more, bumping up the price to 24,000. Should somewhat help with the spam, although I'm pretty sure a lot more people who have actually wanted a battle rating change and not an economy change. So what do all of these numbers mean, Mike? Well, essentially across the board, the bombers have been massively increased in price. This should reduce bomber spam simply because people cannot afford them anymore. The Hunter has been reduced, which should increase Hunter spam again. The MBTs have all been reduced as well, so even though they were bumped up to 9.0, they are also much less expensive to run, and you should be seeing a lot more of them, which further adds to my 9.0 battle rating black hole theory. And the Japanese are just getting shafted as always, there's nothing really new there. You know, for a company that calls themselves Gaijin, they really hate the Japanese. Anyways lads, this video has gone on long enough really. This has been an in-depth review of both the battle rating and the economy changes. Hopefully I didn't lose you in the plot somewhere along the lines. If you want to take a look at the battle rating chart yourself, I leave a link to the Reddit post down below that I've made, so you can just look at the image and see how everything stacks up. I've included all the tanks from 5.7 up, not only the tanks that got changed. I included all of them, so you can really compare what tanks are going to be facing what. I'm also going to be leaving the link for the official forum post of the battle rating changes and the economy changes in the description down below, as well as the Golden Eagles app, as well as Many Miles Away's video on this topic. Chances are by the time this video is live, the patch has already dropped. If not, it is going to drop very soon. It is dropping on the 17th, so just be prepared. But anyways lads, my name is MikeGoesBoom, and as always, thank you for watching.
You can lift your head up to the sky, take a deeper breath and give it time. You can walk the path along the lines with your shattered frame of mind. Instead you could always stay. We can wait right here and play until somehow you can find